Welcome to a new lecture in your course, Semantics and Pragmatics. Today's lecture is going to be about the cooperative principle. So in normal conversations, speakers usually try to give specific answers to questions, give new information that hearers can know and would benefit from, instead of information that they already know about. They try to give them relevant information, information that is related to what the conversation is about. They try to give them information that is easy to understand for the hearers. Speakers also try to avoid ambiguity, try to avoid misleading the listener and the hearer, so that the conversation would take place normally, and both the speaker and hearer will benefit from the conversation. So these points that we just mentioned reflect a principle that we have in pragmatics that we call the cooperative principle. So from its name, there is a sort of cooperation between the speaker and the hearer in a conversation. So this principle is a social rule which speakers try to follow when they talk to hearers in conversations. The cooperative principle can be stated as simple as the way that we have it here: be as helpful to your hearer as you can. So the speaker tries to be as helpful to his hearer as he can. As we said, he tries to make the hearer understand what he says. He tries to avoid ambiguity. He tries to be relevant to the topic of the conversation. The fact that speakers normally try to follow this principle is used by the hearers in making inferences. So the hearers assume that the speakers will follow this principle, and this assumption leads them to make inferences from the utterances they hear. And we will see an example of these inferences in a bit. Being cooperative in conversation involves more than just telling the truth. So telling the truth is part of being cooperative with your hearer, but there is more to it, and we will mention what some aspects for it, to be exact, of how you can be cooperative to your hearer. Look at this example here. The second speaker in our example here is telling the truth, but even though he's telling the truth, he is not being cooperative with the hearer. So look at, the mother is asking her son, who put the cat in the bathtub? Okay, so the son is not being cooperative with her in this conversation. He knows who did it. Okay, it might be him who did it, but he said someone put it there. Okay, so he's telling the truth. Of course someone put it there, but who? He is not being cooperative with his mother, and so he didn't tell her who put the cat in the bathtub. Alright, let's look now at the maxims of Grice, which are based on this principle we just discussed. The philosopher Paul Grice developed 4 components, which we call maxims, of conversational cooperativeness. We call these the maxims of Grice, and they are quantity, quality, relation, and manner. So we'll look at each of these briefly here. We will not delve too much into detail, just so that you can understand what each maxim is about. So the first maxim is called the maxim of quality, which involves basically truthfulness. Okay, we said you need to tell the truth when you are involved in a conversation if you want to be helpful to your hearer. So the guideline here is, do not say what you believe to be false. So this is the maxim of quantity. Telling the truth, being truthful, not telling something that is false. The second one is the maxim of relation, which is basically being relevant. Keep the topic, this is the guideline, keep the topic or keep to the topic of the conversation. Do not talk about other things that are not related to your conversation. This way you will be more helpful to your hearer so that he can understand what you're saying. The third maxim is the maxim of quantity, which is basically informativeness. Tell the hearer just what he needs to know. So don't tell him too much, and also don't tell him less than what he needs to know. So no more, no less than what he needs to know. So don't talk too much, don't go into other topics, and also don't limit the information so that the hearer can understand what you're trying to say. The fourth maxim is the maxim of manner, which basically involves clarity. Speak in a way that the hearer will understand. So try to avoid being ambiguous. Speak in a way that the hearer can understand what you're saying and what you're trying to tell him. So these are the 4 maxims. By following them, the speaker is being cooperative with his listener. He's trying to be helpful to his listener, thus following the cooperative principle we mentioned previously. Now we have something called implicature, which is related to these 4 maxims. The implicature is based on these maxims and is very closely related to them. We will look at an example to make the meaning of implicature clearer here. So there might be a situation in which one or more of the maxims might seem to be violated. So the speaker might seem that he is violating one of the maxims. He might look like he is not telling the truth, or he might seem like he is not being relevant. But in fact, the speaker is being relevant. Okay, so just on the surface, it looks like he's not telling the truth. But the hearer assumes that he is telling the truth, and so he understands something based on this assumption. We will look at an example to make the idea clear. So the hearer's assumption that this is not the case leads him to a particular inference from the speaker's utterance. So the hearer assumes that the speaker follows the 4 maxims. He's being truthful, he's being relevant, he's being clear, so he's being informative. The hearer assumes that the speaker is following these, and based on that he is trying to make inferences from that. Let's look at an example of a situation to make the idea clear. If a speaker says, Mary speaks French, would this lead the hearer to think that Mary is John's daughter? Usually not. But imagine this situation. If you ask me, do any of John's daughters speak a foreign language? You're asking me this question now. And I say, Mary speaks French. You don't know who John's daughters are. You don't know their names. You just ask me if any of them speaks French. And I tell you, Mary speaks French. Then you now will understand. This will lead you to make the inference. This will lead you to make the conclusion that Mary is John's daughter. Okay, hopefully this point is clear. So you don't know who John's daughter are. You just ask me a question. Do any of them speak French? And I tell you, well, Mary speaks French. So you assume that I am being relevant, I am being helpful to you, and so I will not talk about something not related to our conversation, and so you will understand that Mary is John's daughter. How did you reach this conclusion? You reach this conclusion in the previous example because you assume, you, the hearer, assume that I, the speaker, would make a relevant reply to your question. So my reply is relevant. It is not unrelated to your question. In the above situation, if Mary were not in fact John's daughter, then my reply would not be relevant. So if she is not actually his daughter, then my reply would not be relevant, and I wouldn't be following the maxims. But you assume that I am following the maxims, and so you understand that Mary is John's daughter. Thus it is sensible for you to reason as follows. So this is your reasoning. This is how you concluded that Mary is John's daughter. If Mary were not John's daughter, his reply, which is my reply, would not be relevant. I assume, so you assume, that his reply is relevant. You assume that my reply is relevant to our conversation, and therefore Mary is John's daughter. So you see how we reach the fact that Mary is John's daughter from the fact that, from just the utterance that I said, which is Mary speaks French. So the example we have just discussed is a case of implicature. Alright, so this is what we mean by implicature. You assume that the speaker is following the maxims, and based on that you make inferences from what he says. The hearer reaches the conclusion that Mary is John's daughter only if it can be assumed that the speaker is being helpful. So you assume that I am being helpful, and so you reach the conclusion that Mary is John's daughter. Thus the inference that Mary is John's daughter is called an implicature. Okay, so this is what we mean by an implicature. We take an utterance and then we see what it implies. We see the implications that are found in the utterance. So an utterance, like the previous example, Mary speaks French, okay, you will reach the implicature that Mary is John's daughter. Okay, so the utterance is Mary speaks French. The implicature is Mary is John's daughter. Here we have some points related to implicature. The first thing is that implicature is a concept of utterance meaning. If you remember, in the previous lecture, lecture 1, we talked about the difference between utterance meaning and sentence meaning. We said that utterance meaning is related to context. So the context helps us to reach certain inferences and conclusions from a speaker's utterance. So it is a concept, it is related to utterance meaning, not sentence meaning. Implicature is related to the method through which speakers understand the indirect elocutions of utterances. We said that in the previous lecture there are direct and indirect elocutions. So implicature is closely related to indirect elocutions. What the speaker is trying to say beyond the literal meaning of the utterances. So more than just the literal meaning. What is the speaker trying to say when he says Mary speaks French? The speaker is trying to say that Mary is John's daughter. So we understand, we take the inference from this and we reach the indirect elocution. In a case of implicature, the hearer assumes, as I said, that the speaker is not violating one of the conversational maxims. So it is important that the hearer assumes that his speaker is being cooperative with him. He's being helpful to him. He is not violating one of the maxims. And so he reaches certain inferences. Of course, the maxims, as we said, relevance, informativeness, clarity, and so on, truthfulness as well. Okay, so this is basically it. Hopefully these 3 points are clear to you. The cooperative principle, that the speaker is being helpful to the hearer, the maxims of Grice, the 4 principles that we need to follow to be cooperative to our hearers, and also implicature, which are the things that we base and the information that we understand based on our assumption that the speakers are being helpful to us, and so we understand various things based on this assumption. So this is it for today's lecture. Inshallah, in the next lecture we're going to take some practical applications about pragmatics. So today's lecture concluded our discussion of pragmatics. Inshallah, in the next one we will take some practical applications to apply some of the knowledge and the theories we discussed in the previous lectures, where we started talking about pragmatics. So similar to semantics, we took a lecture which was called Practical Applications of Semantics. The next one will just be a simple applications of pragmatics. So I will see you inshallah in the next lecture. Thank you for listening, and hopefully you found this lecture interesting and useful, and thank you as always.